What is up, guys? Sir Tesla Gamer here, coming at you with another video. Now, every tank player in gold needs to understand this because this is how you climb out of gold as a tank. Your DPS are going to get diffed often, and your supports are going to underperform very often. You need to accept that for what it is and play around that because that's how everyone's gold experience is. I remember when I was in gold, it was terrible, it was so annoying to climb out of it, but that's just how it is. So at this rank, the matchmaking system is trying to rush the best players out of gold and into platinum while simultaneously trying to push the underperformers back down into silver. So don't act surprised when your team gets diffed sometimes, and don't get mad at your team because you know very well that you've been diffed before yourself. So don't get tilted, don't get mad at your team. Instead, you should be looking to play tanks that can carry as well as tank quite a lot of damage for your team. So in my opinion, Sigma and Zarya are overall the best tanks to use in gold because of this. Zarya always has huge carry potential, and the bubbles will come in clutch to save your teammates when they inevitably do something stupid. Meanwhile, Sigma's kit provides him with so much utility that you can tank nearly every hero in the game if you manage your cooldowns well. So again, with Zarya, you're gonna be looking to use those bubbles on your teammates whenever they get hooked by a hog that absolutely should not be in gold. With Sigma, you're gonna be using that kinetic grasp whenever there's an ulting Reaper, things like this. Something else you need to keep in mind when tanking in gold is that players who are trying to aggressively climb out of gold will often one-trick a hero that can carry. You need to have that in mind when tanking because if you come across one of those players, you need to be thinking about how you're going to force them to swap or just mitigate their value on the field. So a lot of players like to one-trick soldier, a lot of players like to play lots of Reaper, things like this. You gotta be thinking about how you're gonna tank around them. When it comes to your playstyle as tank to climb out of gold, you're going to want to be playing kind of passive on defense and very aggressive on the attack. On defense, more often than not, supports like to just pick one spot and stay there, so they have very limited line of sights on player heroes like Ana, Baptiste, things like that. They're not very mobile, whereas they should be. So you want to be playing around your supports and your DPS as well. And when it comes to attack, you want to keep that in mind as well, but you obviously do need to be a bit more aggressive. So see what your teammates are doing. Really, they should be seeing what you're doing, but we're just working with what we got here. So if you have a DPS Moira who's being really annoying and basically feeding, go in there and push and support the Moira. Maybe you're able to make something work. Things like this. You want to be kind of observing your team and working with what you got. Another thing you want to be on the look for when you're tanking in gold is how well your DPS are doing. If your DPS are performing very, very well, you're going to want to focus more so on tanking. Obviously, you're still going to be doing damage, but if your DPS are consistently winning against their DPS, winning their duels, you should be focusing on tanking so that way they can just continue doing their work. DPS who are tanked well, they're going to do great stuff. They're going to be able to put in extra damage. Another thing to be mindful of is DPS in gold don't often push high ground. You will come across some players who understand the value and the importance of high ground, but if you're on a map that absolutely requires you to have the high ground or the enemy team is playing the high ground very well, don't expect your DPS to go and push that high ground. It sucks that you're going to have to be the one to go and do it, but you're going to have to be the one to go and do it. So on maps like Numbani, this is huge. Like the tank, I always just tank for going high ground at first, and then I swap off if it's not necessary. But you need to be mindful of that. Don't expect your DPS to just proactively be taking high ground. Lastly, when it comes to using your ultimates, you're really going to want to be using these around the objectives and being defensive of the objectives or offensive on the objectives. So, for example, let's say you're on defense and there's a payload map, you're going to want to use that all whenever they're pushing in. That's the best way to use your ults in gold. That way you get your full team on the ult, getting full damage on the enemy team. Whereas if you were, being super aggressive, trying to get a sneaky play, your team's not going to be able to follow up with you on that and just not going to get value out of your ultimate. So you really want to make sure that your team's there with you when you're using your ultimates. Anyways, guys, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, and comment down below something else that you should keep in mind whenever you're tanking in gold.